Are you interested in getting a Compu-Dobby AVL loom? Or maybe you have one and would like to learn more about it? I'm going to do several videos on each component of the AVL. And today I'm starting with what's called the sticky beam or the sandpaper beam. If you'd like to watch all the videos in this series, I've put them in a playlist and you can find that link below in the description. I have an A series, so I'll be speaking mostly about that, but if there's other models that AVL makes that are different, I will mention that as well. So let's get started. This is the beam of an AVL loom, and it's unique to the AVL company. It is a cylinder that rolls as you weave. It has on it what AVL calls a sticky beam, or a lot of people refer to it as a sandpaper beam because it is covered with sandpaper. To tie onto this front beam, I am using a wool cashmere blend, and this particular fiber is going to stick extremely well. When you get more slippery fibers like silk or tencel, they do tend to slip. At least the tencel does while it's still just the warp. Once I get a woven part of tencel, then it sticks to the beam fine. You want to separate your warp threads. I use about, an 1.5 inches. And I take a dog comb them out. You want as much surface of the warp touching the beam as possible. So I try to get it flat. AVL suggests that you have approximately 12 inches of warp to wrap around the beam, and you want to smooth it down so that all of the warp is sticking. At this point, it's not important to make the tension very high. The most important thing, as when you're doing any other warp, is to get the tension even across the warp threads. So I continually sort of press on that. If I find I'm getting a little loose, then I'll go back and lift it and tighten it up. Another thing about this beam, as you weave, the beam collects the finished cloth. It will keep wrapping around this beam. The reason you want to use it is if you have a short warp on your loom, or if it's a longer warp, but you intend to cut off your finished cloth as you go. The sticky beam cannot hold a lot of woven fabric, so there's two ways to tie onto this sticky beam. One is actually onto the beam, as I'm doing now. The other way is to use the automatic cloth collection system, and I will show you the complete system, but the way that works is similar to any other loom. You have an apron, and you tie onto the apron as you would normally do. And I will show you that after a while. So let me just continue putting the warp on, and I will be right back. Another reason you may want to use this sticky beam, even if you have a long warp on, is to do a sample to begin with. Sometimes you're not sure how your sample is going to turn out after you've wet washed it. And if you can stick it on the beam quick and easy, and then weave just a small sample, take that off, wet wash it, change anything you need to, like your set in your reed, and then tie on to the other apron rod to finish a longer project. I pull it forward just enough to get similar tension. As it pulls back on the beam, it helps to get it stuck to the sandpaper. You want to make sure to wrap it up around the beam as far as possible. There is a tension roller that I will put on the loom after I finish doing this. It sits underneath the breast beam and puts a little bit of tension on the beam so that the cloth stays stuck to the beam as long as possible to keep the tension correct on the warp. Once your cloth gets off of the beam, it's then tensioned differently as it rolls towards the automatic cloth collection beam. And that's good because it keeps your tension correct on the warp and leaves a little bit of tension off of your woven cloth. If you weave a lot of items with texture, it's not crushing the texture as it goes to the cloth beam and wraps around it. Sometimes if you have bumps in your woven cloth and it gets to the cloth beam, that difference in tension transfers to the warp. It's where the AVL beam is unique. It keeps the tension from the beam to the warp the same, and then it releases tension after it's off of the beam. This is the tension roller that goes underneath the breast beam. It has a little notch here at the end. The fabric on this beam is sort of a rubber or sticky kind of cover. And then let's look underneath the beam and we can see the bracket that this end fits into. It has a spring on it so you can adjust the tension against the beam, and there's one on both sides. I'm going to stick that on. I need to set the camera down to do that, so I will show you once it's attached. Now I have the tension roller attached underneath the beam in the bracket. Another thing this spring does, as the cloth accumulates on the beam itself, it can move down to accommodate more cloth. There's no set amount of cloth that you can tell will go on this beam because everything is different. If you're using a thick yarn, the cloth's going to accumulate faster. If you're using a thin yarn, of course, it's not going to accumulate. So there's no real answer to how much cloth will go around this beam. Let me tell you a little more about the kinds of covers that are available for the front beam. They're all three available from AVL on their website, and I'll put the link below. The sticky beam, which is also called the sandpaper beam, is used for most yarn materials. The soft grip is less abrasive, and it's used for yarns that need more grip than the sandpaper. It's great for yarns like chenille. The smooth grip is for slippery yarns like silk or tencel. Thank you for watching this video, and here are a couple more that you might like to watch. See you next time.